Hey everyone, welcome back to the channel. It's me again, Mark, and today I wanted to show you how I finished this latest piece of mine, my latest artwork. I've always wanted to do a whole body illustration, and in this video I'm going to show you how I did exactly that. And also, I wanted to discuss with you a problem that you might also be facing if you are doing art, and this is a problem that I've had for a very long time, but you can see that on my new artworks here in my sketchbooks that I've managed to fix that problem of mine. And you might also experience this while you are making your art, that sometimes you did all the proportions right, you did all the drawing right, and also you probably have some base colors down on your artwork, but it still doesn't look finished, like it's missing something. And I wanted to share with you how to fix that. What you're probably missing in your artwork is contrast, and I will show you how contrast really helps elevate your artwork in this video, and I'm going to show you some examples on that. Now let's start with the definition of contrast. When it comes to art, contrast is about using strikingly different elements together in a piece. Now contrast is all around us, and actually our eyes are attracted to contrast, and we see it very clearly when there is something contrasting. For example, with contrast we can tell light from dark, and flat objects from 3D objects, and we can also tell what's near or what's far. So using it in our art will really add that dimension, that harmony, that balance, and will avoid our art from being too flat or being too unfinished. Now, when we start drawing on our paper, we already add contrast to it because we are using our pencil and we are creating marks on the paper, so it's no longer white. But there comes a point in your art when all the marks that you've made, all the colors that you've placed doesn't have any contrast, so it helps to understand how you can add more contrast to your artwork. Now, it would be good to look at some examples of classical art so that we can understand this concept more. In this statue, you can see that the smooth skin of the subject in the middle, so that is Jesus, and he is being held by Mary, and you can see that their smooth skin is being contrasted with the folds of the fabric of the clothes, and you can see that that really adds a lot of interest to the piece. It's not just like a very smooth artwork, there are some hard edges and there are some soft edges. Now for our second example, here we have a watercolor painting by John Singer Sargent, and you can see that the soft edges in the clouds above contrast with the hard edges of the water below, which makes it look like the clouds are far and the waters are much more closer to us, because that's just how the eye works. Now, in this third example, which is an art piece from Dan Mora, a comic artist, we can see that contrast is made by using ink to separate light from shadow, and this is a method often done in comic illustrations where the lines are not just used to frame the subject, but they're also used to create separation from light and shadow, where shadows are all made up of dark lines or dark ink. From those three examples, you probably have an idea of how contrast works. It's not always just about the color. Contrast can be done by the structure or by the form of the subject that you are painting. In this particular piece, I wanted to add a little bit of dynamism to the standing pose that the subject is making. So I actually angled up his shoulders and his waist, so it is not like flat. He is not just standing straight, but he is leaning a little bit, and that will add interest. So that is adding some contrast to the form of the subject. I'm also adding contrast when I am painting. You can see there that I've left some spots that are unpainted because I wanted to keep those as highlights. So those highlights, because they are not painted, because there is no color on them, that is just the white of the paper showing, you can see that it adds interest to the piece, like there's something interesting going on. It's not just a flat block of color for the entirety of his clothes. And now I'm also adding contrast with the midtones of his clothing. This will add more dimensionality to the subject that we are painting, to his clothes. We are not just making him look like a flat piece of wall, okay, if you get what I'm meaning, because walls are flat, but once you start painting 3D subjects, you will have to find a way to add dimension and to add depth to them. So adding midtones to their colors, not just the base tone, will add some contrast and will add that interest. But midtones aren't everything, they're just the halfway point of painting. And some artists will actually refer to applying midtones like the ugly face of the painting process, because when you are painting midtones, your eyes doesn't attach itself to anything, because the midtones are not that final, they're not that dark, so they're just halfway there. So adding some darker lines like what I'm doing now on this process, the final shadows or the darkest parts of the painting, that will really take you out of that awkward zone of that like mid-tone or halfway there painting. So that is the going out of the ugly phase of the painting process. And using inks is just one way to finish a painting. Some other artists will use like pure color for their darkest parts. They're not going to be using inks, and that is much more applicable if you are doing like watercolor painting where you don't want to use black. You just use colors for everything, even shadows. Some watercolor artists will use blue for shadows instead of black, so that will add much more color to their pieces. And using black actually lends to a much more illustrative, like a comic style work, and that is what I'm actually experimenting on this one. And this is also the reason why I chose contrast as the subject for this video, because the black ink really adds a lot of contrast very quickly. Now on my other art pieces, you can probably see me using color for my shadows, and for my midtones, I'm not using black ink on my other illustrations. So only now that I'm actually making a full-on illustration with black ink, and that is just something that I wanted to experiment on. But once you understand the concept of contrast, of adding different tones, different colors, midtones and shadow tones on your painting, you can pretty much make any illustration that you want. You can copy any illustration that you see on the internet once you have a grasp of how their contrast works and how you can emulate it on your painting. Now, if you want to learn more about contrast, you can look for it on other artists on YouTube, or you can comment down below and I can probably make some more in-depth explanation with contrast later on. But I think that's about it for this painting session, and I hope you guys like the explanations that I made, and I'll see you on the next one. Bye!